Everyone. Thank you for joining us for this free webinar. Today, we will be demoing Sabre ETO, which is the custom solution for Microsoft Business Central and manufacturers. We estimate that today's webinar will take up about an hour of your time, including some time at the end for Q&A. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on demand after the live session. All attendees will receive a follow-up email after the webinar is complete with a link to access the presentation. In the chat, you'll also find our social media and website, as well as a webinar feedback form. It would really help us out if you could provide us some information so we can provide you with better demos and webinars in the future. You'll also find a link to a 30-day free trial of Sabre ETO, which is available in AppSource. With that being said, I'd like everyone to submit questions through the question panel during the session or wait until the end for the Q&A. Please remember to stay muted during the session. Now, I'd like to introduce you to Robert Jolliffe, President of Sabre Limited.
Hi, everybody. It's very nice to have attendees in the session today. Thank you very much. Everybody hear me okay? Caitlin and
yeah, you sound great.
Excellent. Today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a demonstration review, sort of a teaser on Sabre ETO, which is our product for engineered order manufacturing, which some people also call custom equipment manufacturing or custom manufacturing. To understand Sabre ETO, you really have to understand Microsoft Dynamics Business Central. So I'm going to be spending a fair amount of time kind of introducing that and explaining it to people. My expectation is that the audience for this would be those who are interested in Microsoft Dynamics Business Central. They're interested in perhaps replacing their existing ERP system. They're interested in understanding what ETO is and how Business Central can handle ETO. I happen to know that there are a couple of clients on the call who already use the ETO system, so this is going to be very high level and very basic for them. But it would be great if they want to stay on and answer any people's questions if there's anybody on the call who is wondering whether the product is good and does what it says it does. So my goal is to spend few minutes about just talking a little bit about Sabre. I want to do a brief overview of what I'll call it an ideal Business Central implementation would look like from a timeline point of view. I want to spend a few minutes talking about Business Central, its benefits and its capabilities. A few minutes talking about Business Central manufacturing. I'm not going to have very much demo or show and tell part of that. I'm going to have more of a discussion about it. We're going to do about 25 minutes, I hope, roughly, of going over the Sabre ETO product. And what I've done is I filmed a group of little vignettes, little videos, if you will, of the Sabre ETO product. And we're going to walk through those videos and kind of show how the product works. And then hopefully at the end, I will time it well enough that I'll leave about 15 minutes for question and answer. And we'll take you guys off mute so that you can actually ask some questions. And those of you who are shy and you want to just type the question, and feel free to just type the question. So first of all, we're going to start with the background about Sabre. Sabre is an exclusively a manufacturing partner of Microsoft. Microsoft, unlike some of the other products in the market, sells to a broad set of different types of industries. So companies could be it could be government organization, it could be a not-for-profit, it could be a professional services, a distribution company, manufacturing company, et cetera. And a lot of our competitors sell to a broad swath of different industries. Sabre's a little bit different in that we only sell to manufacturing. To be honest, I think there's only maybe 2 other companies in North America that are like us in that sense for Business Central. I started the company in 1998 out of my basement, and by 2008, I was approached by Microsoft to become a Microsoft Dynamics partner. We began selling the product you're going to see today in its previous form around 2012, 2013. By 2017, we were providing fixed fee quotations where the customers were able to buy the product and have a committed guaranteed price for the implementation. By 2018, we were doing everything remotely, which, if you think about it, is not during the curve. And today we're considered a market leader by Microsoft, where we regularly get leads from Microsoft for manufacturing, and we are have been identified by them as being sort of a leading edge partner. We are also the manufacturing partner that other partners hire. So as I mentioned, there are Microsoft Dynamics partners that are more broad in their skill set. We end up being hired by a number of them to help them with their manufacturing projects. So we're very well regarded in the industry. I personally have a Lean Six Sigma background as a manufacturing engineer, and having pursued and continually kept up to date on lean manufacturing, theory of constraints, if anybody is familiar with the book The Goal and Eli Goldratt's subsequent books. So I really like the idea of trying to improve processes, and we've used those lean principles to develop our fixed fee model. One other thing about us is every project we do is remotely deployed. So we rarely visit clients, not never, but rarely visit clients. So I want to talk about the timeline and approach for implementing the Business Central solution, along with the there was a question, by the way, that came in through chat. I didn't quite follow what it was, but the Business Central product needs to be in place in order to use Sabre ETO. Sabre ETO is not a standalone product. It relies on Microsoft Dynamics Business Central. So I wanted to walk through what a basic project timeline would look like, the way Sabre does it, because this is something that people are always interested in understanding. So we'll spend a couple minutes on this. If we were to start a project, theoretically, at the beginning of some year in the future, we'll call it 2099. If anybody wants to start a project and you're going to wait that long, I'm going to be disappointed. But if we were to start the project in 2099, the way we would walk through it from January 1 is we'd spend about the first 5 months doing what we call discovery. Discovery is a process where we interview different. We would start around the beginning of January, and we would do approximately 5 weeks of discovery, where we would be interviewing the team members from the organization to validate that what you do in your organization is what we expect you to do. A lot of our competitors would do discovery so that they would understand what you do. They would not have a background in manufacturing. They'd want you to explain your business to them. We will probably know your business fairly well, but we'll be looking for what makes you unique amongst other manufacturing companies. So we'll be looking for the 90-10 or 80-20 kind of rule to identify those small things you do that are different. Then we get it. We used to call it intro training. My slide deck's a little old. I have to go find the original and edit it. But we now call it theory training, or theory. And during the theory phase of the project, what we do is walk through what the system can and can't do with usually senior team members, so that you understand its capabilities. But we're not teaching you to use it. This gets a little confusing to people because they think, oh, I'm going to go in training, so therefore I'm going to learn how to use the software. But actually, we need to teach you what it can and can't do, as opposed to how to do it. After this, we get into what we call adjustment, which is a period of time when we set up the software. We actually put some data into it. If you're an engineer to order company, you might be familiar with the concept of running a pilot production. Then this is the idea of getting ready to run pilot production. And training is actually more the practical training, having set up a system with sample data in it. The advanced training gets you into the software, using it and learning how to click the buttons and make things happen. But that's going to rely on whether all the setups and configurations were done correctly. And so the subsequent period, which we call piloting, is a period of time in which you are actually running scenarios through. This is the core project. And for our, what we'll call a silver project, which is kind of a mid-sized customer with a mid-sized level of complexity, this will often take about 7 months, and this is in an ideal situation. Between each of the phases, we'll do a phase review, and there's this activity. It's a little confusing. We call this pilot or piloting. There is a pilot, which is actually an activity in which we run through real world scenarios and validate that they work, usually taking from orders you received in the past couple of months, and we just want to run them through again, make sure they match with what the new system can provide, the same requirements that the old system could provide. And assuming all of that goes well, think of it like you're passing a university exam, then you get to pick a go live date. Typically, most customers can't really finish that and go live the next day. They need to do some preparation. And also, we only allow for a few go lives per month. So if you miss our deadline as well, first come, first serve, you might have to pick the next month. So in my example, I give a 1 month gap between the end of the core project and the beginning of go live. It's very common. These two phases require mostly the customer's team. You are actually leading these phases because you're doing the most work, and we are there to guide you and support you and provide an ongoing level of assistance during the project. And typically, we want to start off with a really small, tight group during the theory phase. The discovery, maybe a few more people, but the theory and the adjustment are going to be that small group. And that small group will go through the training and start testing. And when they validate that actually this stuff seems to be working, then they'll bring in a larger expanded group of people. Typically, their purpose is because the small group have made the decisions, they want the expanded group to validate the decisions and make sure they make sense. And once that's done, and you've been able to pass your pilot, you start training the rest of the company. Maybe we are assisting you in training. Some companies don't need us to assist because there's a lot of business processes they're going to be teaching, as well as just what the software does. And of course, we're not able to teach the way you want to run the software. We're going to be able to teach the way it works out of the box. This whole technique is based on an agile implementation methodology, which means that we're not trying to decide everything up front. We're allowing for mistakes. And we're going to suggest best practices based on our experience. And then from those best practices, your team will test and confirm that the system is working the way you thought it would be. And then you'll adjust it for the mistakes, because there will always be mistakes. The things will never be perfect the first time. We'll adjust it, and then we'll test again, and we'll keep refining it until we get it to where it needs to be for go live. The goal usually is that when you go live, you've covered off a minimum viable go live. Everything you need to make sure that you are ready with your team, and you have everything in place that you're going to need as far as the business requirements, so that you go live and you're able to run your business. Often we leave out new things. So if you're not doing it today, you don't really have the experience doing it, you want to do it, it's nice to have, maybe even a very important thing, but you just don't have that capability. We would recommend doing that as a phase 2. If you have purchase the ERP system because you have a really critical requirement that is actually keeping the business from moving forward, that will typically have to be put into phase 1. So I want to cover a little bit of Business Central. If anybody has any questions, please, by the way, put them into chat, and we'll get to them near the end. So to get a little bit of a background into what Business Central is, I want to start by saying Business Central is a true cloud ERP system. I'm going to talk about this a little bit, and I'll show a couple little snips of things that make it a true cloud ERP system. Part of what makes it a true cloud ERP system is the vendor, Microsoft, owns the cloud infrastructure that Business Central runs on. And this is the Azure data centers. I think this is as of 2021 or 2022. So some of these ones with the announced regions, the little dotted lines, for instance, the West US 3, they may already be in place. But in the United States, for instance, Virginia has the East US and East US 2, I believe. Both of them are in Virginia, maybe North Carolina. And then Arizona has a US government location. There's US Department of Defense, maybe New Jersey. I'm not 100% sure where that is. West US is in Arizona, I believe, and Washington State. But they're all over the place, and the dots aren't exactly where they're located, like Canada. Oops, excuse me. Canada East up here and Canada Central are not nearly far apart in reality. But the Canada Central is in Mississauga, Ontario, and the Canada East is in Quebec City. So these data centers are relatively close to where you are, and they are owned by Microsoft, operated by Microsoft, and Microsoft Dynamics Business Central is running in these data centers that have, and people joke and they ask if there's alligators in it, but they have moats around some of them. And this is to prevent somebody from driving up close enough to the to the facility to cause damage. And if anybody's wondering why would they do that, you may want to look into Nashville. I believe it was in 2022 where somebody parked a camper van outside of an AT&T data center or switching center in downtown Nashville and blew their camper van up and caused a lot of damage and brought down a lot of telephone systems. So that's part of it. But what else makes a cloud ERP true cloud? I think there's a few things that are really critical. And what I've found is there's a lot of ERP systems out there that call themselves cloud, and really what they mean is it's subscription and they take care of the server. But in my opinion, the true cloud ERP systems need to be serverless, which means that the system runs somewhere in the cloud and you don't need to know where it is. There's no server from your point of view. There's no accessing it and getting access to a server. It's just running in a browser. It could be running in a smart app. Something like Spotify is a good example of a true cloud application. It's device agnostic. It doesn't really matter what kind of computer system you're running it on, it's going to work on it. So it's going to run on a Macintosh, it's going to work on a PC, it's going to work on an iPad, it's going to work on an Android tablet, it's going to work on my iPhone. The devices don't really matter to it, and this is a characteristic of cloud. If you're trying to connect to some of our competitors have their software that runs in a terminal server or Citrix environment, so you have to use Windows to access them. And if you tried to run them on a phone or you're trying to run them on a tablet, they're unusable because you have this almost tiny text and you're trying to use your phone like it's got a mouse and it doesn't. Another feature is they're evergreen, which means they're constantly being upgraded. Gmail is a typical example of this. People who use Gmail, when they log in every now and again, there's a little pop-up and it says there's a new feature. Same with Office 365 now. Whether you're using it online or you're downloading and installing it, it's constantly being updated. And the final feature of what I consider true cloud ERP is the App Store model. If you think about your phone, you have the Apple App Store, iTunes App Store, or you have the Google Play Store. True cloud software generally has some kind of App Store model where you're adding features from third parties. QuickBooks Online today is offering the same. Microsoft Dynamics is, NetSuite is, this concept that the core product is a platform and the add-ons are created by third parties, certified by the vendor, and then made available is a really critical part of what makes it cloud-based. So I'll show you an example of what it looks like. It's very modern. So this is the Business Central kind of landing page. It looks like a dashboard that your staff would access. This is what you would see. Think of it as the menu. And if I scroll up and down through the scroll bar here, as I scroll down, you can see it's quite large and there's a lot of information on it. As you get lower, you're going to see that there are charts and different shortcuts to different pieces of information. So in this case, this person's favorite account is petty cash. They have $76,000 in petty cash. That's pretty impressive. Maybe a little scary. As you can see, they have like a very simplified little income statement showing on the screen here, and this Power BI, which I'll talk about, I believe, a little bit more later in my chat. Oh, excuse me, didn't mean to do that. So Business Central, very modern software, very easy to get into. It's running in a browser. So this is Edge, but I use it in Chrome all the time, and I use it in Safari as well. So it's role-centered. And what that means, the role here means that depending on your job, there's a different menu system, if you will, to access. So this is a project manager's role center. And as you can see, this menu up here includes jobs and job tasks and customers and items and resources. Down here in their activities, they have over budget jobs, they have work in process. So the dashboard is designed for their job. If I move over to another example, I have a purchasing managers or a purchasing agents dashboard, and I have a completely different set of menu items. Now, This is called a hamburger icon. The hamburger icon, also this search icon here, allows me to find things that aren't on my menu as they are today. So if I happen to be a purchasing agent, but I do some project management of jobs and I want to add jobs to my menu, I can go in, find it through those two search methods, and then just add it to the menu myself. It's very, very easy to use that way. But there are somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 different profiles that are out of the box. So you just choose what the person does and you assign the correct profile to them. It is cloud-based, as I mentioned, and I mentioned that it runs on different devices. So I did a little video of it running on an iPhone. This is a simulated iPhone, but the application is not simulated. This is running on this emulator as it would look if I had my iPhone and I ran it there. So I can actually get in, I can scroll, I can use the product. It is responsive. If I flipped it up right in portrait, it would change the orientation of it. It can access the camera. And this is a big part of what makes cloud-based software work. So the camera on the device you're running it on, if it has a camera, it's aware that the camera's there. So I have clients who use it when there's damage on a purchase receipt, for instance. They can log into the app, they can take a picture of it and add it to a purchase order or record it so that somebody in the office has that picture, and they can put notes on it as well when they upload it. So it's very, very powerful in that regard, because there are times when these devices have capabilities that, again, going back to my example earlier, if you're trying to run a terminal server version of a software package, it's not going to be able to connect to the camera. It's really tightly integrated with all of Microsoft Office. So I'm going to show you Outlook very quickly. So I've added the Outlook add-in. I don't want to run it on my personal Outlook because then I end up connecting to a trial system. So I'm going to use this trial system and connect to it only in the cloud. And as you can see, there's a little instruction. Email was sent to me, but I could jump in, and what it's going to do is it's going to take my email address that was sent to me and cross-reference it with a customer record, and it's going to give me access to that customer data right inside my Outlook. So I'm connected to Business Central in that right-hand band, and I'm actually drilling into invoices or sales orders and quotes. I could take a look at anything that's being saved into the system for this customer. So if I want to go look at their current open balance, late payment history, et cetera, I have access to that right from my Outlook. Even cooler is from Outlook, if I have in the email I've received, I have a little, in this case, I have some item descriptions and quantities. I could have Business Central use a little bit of AI and say, I think this might be somebody asking for me to do a spare parts order quote, and try and figure out what it is they're asking for. Oh, here it is. Okay, these look like the two items they're asking for from my item list. Go ahead and create a sales quote to send this. Now, this could also be used to create a purchase order. It could be used to create a sales invoice. So it's capable of looking through, I scrolled down a little too far in my video here. It's capable of looking through all of the information on the email, trying to cross-reference it and imply what the person wants. And if you combine this now with the new technologies of Microsoft's Copilot, which is an AI technology, it'll essentially, like ChatGPT, you could tell it, write a nice response, thanking them for the order, and it'll pound out a little email for you. Now, what I'm doing is I'm generating a PDF of this quote, and I'm actually attaching it to the document up in Business Central. You don't have to do that, but I just wanted to do it for purposes of demonstrating that can be done. So this quote that I'm going to send, which I've just done, send it by email, is now also saved in Business Central, so I have access to it. I joke usually during the first couple meetings with clients, and I say, we're going to train you to use the incredibly complicated report editor so that you could change the layout and design of these documents, like this sales quote that was going to be sent to the client. It's called Microsoft Word. And people sometimes laugh at me, but I can't hear you guys laughing. I'm sure you're all laughing at home right now. So I'm very happy with the audience. I can use Excel to edit data, not just view it. I'll show this quickly as well. It's another little vignette I created. So if I want to just open in Excel, every ERP system from the 21st century, certainly, and even late 20th century is capable of doing this. So I could go in and I can export to Excel and just open up the data in Excel. This is look at the item list on my screen. I exported it to Excel. But with Business Central, I can edit it with Excel. And what this does, you'll notice it's a little different. When I open the Excel file, it actually doesn't have anything in it. But when I click Enable Editing, what will happen is I have installed a plugin into my Excel that connects to Business Central. You see it open here on the right, and it's loading data and retrieving information out of Business Central and refreshing my screen. So this is a live interactive connection to Business Central in Excel. In my sample, what I've decided to do is I'm going to increase the unit price of all the products by 5%. This is a pretty broad kind of activity that I'm going to do. Normally, you wouldn't necessarily do something quite so aggressive, but I'm not going to filter it. I'm just going to go find the unit price column. So every column in Business Central is here. I can't edit all of these. I could try, but they'll kick back, and when I try and post it or publish it, it'll give me errors. So I can't edit standard cost from here because you have to do that through a different process in the system. And so it's going to enforce the rules of the system. It's also going to enforce any extra capabilities that I've put in. Like if I want to make some unit prices on some items so that they're read-only, I can do that. And I've demonstrated it here by having 3 items that I won't be able to upgrade. Or update. So I'm going to put in a formula, just a normal Excel formula. I'm going to copy that down using normal Excel. If you don't know that trick, by the way, it's amazing. It'll copy the formula to the bottom of the list you have. And I'm just going to copy that to my clipboard. So Control-C, click here, and paste the values. So I got rid of the formula. So now I have all of these new prices. I'm going to click Publish. And it's sitting here, and it's pushing all this stuff back and checking each item as it pushes that price in to make sure that you're allowed. And like I said, I set 3 up so it won't work. So it errored on 3 and successfully published 123 out of 126. I don't need this anymore, so I won't save it. And whatever. And then what I'll do is I'll scroll over, and I'm just going to hit the F5 on my keyboard to refresh the screen. So just notice that the first 2 are 4,000. Let me get that done. And I hit F5, and now they're 4,200. So it pushed all that data back into the system. The integration with Excel is just incredible. And I think that's another example of cloud capabilities. And I think this might be my last example of Business Central's capabilities that I pulled here is Power BI. So Power BI is another cloud solution from Microsoft. And this is another thing about cloud. Cloud usually likes cloud. They talk to each other. So I could sign into this Power BI system, and this is where I would create dashboards and reports. From within Business Central, there are a number of pre-created standard Power BI examples. And if I just follow the little wizard, it's going to set one of those demo reports up for me, and it's going to embed it. So that's all I have to do. All I have to do now is just finish that. And my Power BI reports are like enabled. You can see it's different now. And it's going to tell me, okay, here are all the reports you have. Which one do you want to show? And I click the one I want, and boom, it comes up and it shows on my screen. You can then go into this and edit it. You could create new Power BI reports. If you're familiar with Power BI, this is very, very powerful. So that's the end of my little sort of intro into Business Central to give you a bit of a feel of what the product is. I'm a little behind time, so I'll go through this fairly quickly, I hope. So standard manufacturing, I want to talk a bit about standard manufacturing because we're here to really talk about ETO, not just Business Central. But I do want to have a very quick overview of where your typical kind of manufacturing in most ERPs is done. So what is traditional manufacturing? First of all, it has an expectation of carrying inventory, which ETOs usually don't do. They buy all their inventory or all their materials to the jobs they make. They don't carry much inventory on the shelf that is there for anticipation of a job. Most ERP systems, manufacturing capabilities are built around this idea that you would pre-create bills of materials and routings. And In ETOs, you would create these bills of material routing templates just for the purposes of creating the order. That's a one-off that isn't going to be reordered again, and it's quite a waste of time. And the other thing is routings typically assume that you're going to know how long it takes to make things because you made it before, and you can predict that it's going to take so long to drill and so long to CNC, and it's all built around this idea of walking through all of the processes, and ETOs don't usually do that. Business Central has that capability. So it has a production bomb capability, which I've screenshot here, and a production routing capability. So I can have, it goes through the assembly department, the packing department, and it takes a certain amount of setup time and a certain amount of run time. Maybe this is 1 hour to manufacture it and a quarter of an hour to set it up. And then the packing department, I'm not sure why it would take 2 hours to pack it, but the whole idea that you are able to create these and have them for reusability is great if you sell the same things over and over again, which ETOs don't do generally. So the expectations that your orders are repeating and you're going to get the same order every time is kind of standard in traditional manufacturing, but it isn't at all how ETOs work. Sales orders are also part of what drives standard manufacturing, because standard manufacturing is based on this, which is the supply chain. And in the supply chain, somebody sends me a request for quotation. So I estimate it and I quote it. They create a quote, internally purchase quote, and they make a decision and they cut a PO to me, and then I get a sales order because it's generally something I make. And I'll pull it from inventory and ship it if I have it. And if I don't already have it, then I'll send it out to have it manufactured in a production order. I might pull items from other warehouses I have. And then occasionally I'll have things that I need to buy to inventory in order to pull and either use in the production order or use in the sales order. And I'll ship it and I'll invoice it. And that's it. And this flow, you may notice there's kind of a mirror. So the RFQ, purchase order to side, RFQ, purchase order, purchase quote to side, purchase order, et cetera, is the same because our customers buy from us the way we buy from our vendors generally. And ETOs are this, but not. They're very different because they don't have this part. It's not as simple as this. So let's take a look at engineer to order manufacturing. And now we're going to get into the Sabre ETO, but I'm going to talk about the workflow because I just showed you a workflow of a sort of traditional manufacturing supply chain. ETO has a different kind of way of working. So if these are the hats worn by different people in the organization: a salesperson, a project managers, engineering, operations, delivery being field service, and accounting. In a typical ETO, these are kind of the main areas, the main hats. Operations would be your shop floor people and your buyer or planner people. This is really now, if we look at this, the people with a sales hat will typically get an RFQ from somebody, and then they'll create an opportunity. Now, I've put the create an opportunity here. Not everybody does opportunities, but if you do, the opportunity is something to track prior to ever having sent a quote. It's all the communication, all of the interaction with the client leading up to the quote. So the folks who came to this meeting that aren't existing customers might cause an opportunity to be created by Sabre. Once we create a quote and send the quote to the client, then typically at that point, we're either going to win or not win the job. And the quote, I have the little squiggly line because the quote creation is very manual. And it kind of needs to be, because if you automate the effort to create quotes, you get into what's called a product configurator, which is an enormous amount of work. And you only would do that if you have a large enough repeatability to your quotes that it would make sense. Otherwise, you do them manually because it's just too cost inefficient otherwise. So continuing, the orange are not done in ERP, by the way. The orange is stuff that's done in some other software or some other system, or it's just a decision. The blue is in the ERP. Maybe when you created the opportunity, you also create a project so that you could record time, even though you haven't won it yet. Often it's only done after it's won. So once the job is won and the project is created. And then it goes into some kind of CAD system, SolidWorks, Rivet, I think it's called, or Revit, Inventor, Pro Engineer, Solid Edge, whatever it happens to be that your company uses, and you design the product, and I'm assuming this is a machine builder company, you design the product that you're going to sell to the client. And you're going to want to create what I call a draft BOM. This is getting into a little bit of Sabre ETO terminology. When that draft BOM is created, I want to have an approval workflow so that a supervisor in the project management side says that the engineering team's draft BOM is good and I like it and I'm willing to accept it. And I'm going to load that in. And when I load it in, I'm going to automatically create the items based on the draft BOM that was created. And I want those items created because often in an ETO space, I have a lot of items that are being designed by the designers and they're one-offs. They are drawings that I'm creating that are my own drawings. They are not, I'm not going to order them for another project. They're very specific to the project because the project is very specific to an end use. And I'm very unlikely to get another one that's exactly identical. I might have some commonality, and if they're common, that I don't want them to create new copies of things that should be there already. So I want some control over that. And again, the project manager is kind of doing a lot of this stuff. And this auto creation should just be one click. Bam, 200 items created. The releases needed to planning is a decision that the project manager makes to release long lead time items to the planning department. So they'll start buying them early while leaving things later in case there have to be redesign work and changes. And this process is going to repeat in a bit of a cycle. So all of this stuff will happen over and over and over again, from design machine, create BOM, all of this will happen in a series of activities. It's not like designer will be done, everything's pushed through, and now the whole project can continue without ever going back to the designer. The designer will keep working on it as time goes on. Once I release that, once the project manager has flagged something, okay, I want something done with this now, then the operations team picks it up. And at this point, it should actually be locked down so design can't change it anymore. So they would make a buy, make or use decision. Buy, obviously create a purchase order, make, if I have the equipment to make it myself and I have maybe I have to buy the materials to make it, but I'm going to make it myself, or use existing because at some point in time in the past, a designer designed something, made a mistake, but we ended up buying the part and now it's sitting in a cage somewhere and we want to use it up. So we want to be able to see that. We're going to receive the items from wherever, whether we fabricated them or we took them from inventory into the job, into the project. We're going to collect time, and the time will be engineering time. It'll be shop floor employee time, and it'll probably be installer time, which might be the shop floor employees who travel to the site. Sometimes some engineered order or project manufacturers don't end up installing themselves, but they coordinate with the installers. You're going to assemble whatever it is that you're making, and typically it's an assembly process. So all the parts come together and you assemble it, and then you ship it to your client. Often, I would say more often than not, the ETO or project manufacturer also is involved in the installation at the site, and then they're testing, provisioning, making sure that whatever they've sold the client is working correctly, training them if necessary. Then you're finished. So your typical manufacturing company doesn't go through this reiteration or loops of design process. They do this, but they don't do this part where they're actually responsible for making sure the product is delivered. The other thing that's different from an accounting point of view, and accounting is kind of disconnected a little bit from this. Usually the project managers are telling the accounting department that the deposit invoice can be sent. That's kickoff. That's we started the project and the invoice. And some number of progress invoices. Very rare that there aren't any, but I have seen some that just have a deposit and a final. But typically there's more than one invoice involved in the sales cycle. They want project accounting, general ledger, your AP, AR, and WIP recognition is typically a big part of it as well. Okay, so jumping in a little bit more into Business Central. Business Central is going to pull data out of something called AppSource. AppSource is an app store like Google Play Store. And what I've done here is I've logged into it. I've chosen to search for manufacturing, and I found 4,711 results in apps. I'm not sure if that's after I filtered out manufacturing or not. If I search for Sabre, I may actually go into Business Central and I go into the part of Business Central where you install apps. When I search for Sabre, you'll find a group of Sabre apps. Sabre ETO is the one we're going to talk about today. These are dashboards that we've created, and Sabre Production is an add-on that all of our customers under our support contracts have. And I think one customer who isn't under support contract has purchased it. So installing Sabre ETO is super easy. We just click the free trial button, click it again, and then install. Change your language if you want to change the language. And that's it. Sabre ETO is installed in about 5 minutes. You just have to sit and wait. So no IT department, no programmers or anything fancy installing it. If I just look now at the opportunity phase of the project, we're in that flow. Within the system, there are opportunities, and it is a, like I said, it's like a list of different types of contacts I've had with prospects that haven't converted into an order yet. When I have an opportunity, I can associate it with a job. So I can either create a job right from the opportunity. There is a create job and right there, and then there's a show job cart, so I can jump into the job. Here's the job that was created. Now I had created the job separately, and I linked it to the opportunity. So I have this link between the two. And then in the opportunity, I have the ability to create tasks. This is very helpful because I can say, hey, for you as a sales rep, to follow an opportunity, I want you to find out who's the key person, like who's the decision maker. I want you to do a verification of the quality of an opportunity. Maybe have some steps. So I can set up these tasks in the opportunity and require my sales reps to go through them prior to ever having a quote, prior to ever having actually started the project. But because I'm able to create the job linked to the opportunity right in the beginning, and the job is a project, I can actually record my time against that job as an engineering designer who's doing some quote drawings for the customer. So I have a job. I want to actually take that job now, and I want to add some detail to it. I want to put in some cost codes, they're sometimes called, or in Business Central called job tasks. They are buckets for holding time and costs and analyzing. So what I do is I have created a default template job, and I'm going to copy from this default template job all of the lines, the task lines of it. And they start at 0000 and they end at 9999. That's just my standard list or standard range that I do. And then I can choose, I could be a little bit more sophisticated. I'm going to copy the quantities of the job planning lines that I've also added to the job. And what happens now is I have a job. It has a kind of like a chart of accounts of all of the different areas where costs come from. And because I copied quantities in, I actually have some data in that job. So I'll jump back into it. And you'll see that there's billable amounts and there's some costs, some budget costs in it. And that's because the job template has a default price. So that's $150,000 for the job and a default progress invoicing. So I just have to change each of these to 125,000, and I've changed my job to $125,000 total with the same percentage progress invoices. I also have added some engineering and project management time, etc. So I just have to change these to something more appropriate for this size job. So I'm going to reduce the number of engineering hours I think I need because it's a little bit smaller. And maybe I can leave the rest the same as it is. So I reduce the project management and the engineering time. So I have a dollar value for the job, and I have an engineering hours and total. I've begun to accumulate for the project some costs, projected costs, budget costs for this project. This is how ETOs work. ETOs typically don't know how much the thing is going to cost when they first start. They have a rough idea based on what the sales reps put in. But as the engineering team goes through and the project management team goes through and fleshes the job out, they want to keep a running total of what that's going to look like. Now, some time has passed. My engineers have done some design, and I'm going to import the BOM. I'm going to skip the draft BOM and the approval of the draft BOM process and do a simpler import because that can just by itself take about 10 minutes to show. So we've added a new feature now that allows us to import the BOM into an intermediate sort of holding area, but I'm going to import it directly into the job itself. So I go into something called a BOM planning line. This is Sabre ETO now. I'm in the actual ETO module because everything I've shown up to this point is actually just being standard nav. and I'm going to take the BOM template and I'm going to import it. Now I'm going to show you, this is a default BOM import template. So this would be for, I can create multiples. I could have an electrical CAD system. I could have my mechanical CAD system, and I could import from any of them. And by the way, you'll always notice I kind of have my little videos always go back to this starting point so that I always know where I'm beginning. So now what I've done though is I've baked the cake in the background and I've set up the import so that it'll import and map to my Excel sheet. And I have an Excel sheet with about 6 or 8 materials on it that I'm going to import. So I'm going to import it into this assembly molding table, BOM. It's basically blank. And when I import it, it's going to import and it's going to auto create the items. So the items in this BOM don't exist yet. And if they did, it would not skip them. But as you can see, I've got a slightly different list here. And these field names, all in caps, map to this Excel workbook that has the BOM in it. So those are the fields of the Excel workbook. I have a vendor number on them, and I've identified these items as purchased type. Now the item type creates the template from which I make the item. So when I import the item and it gets auto-created, the item type is the template that's used. So I'm going to import this BOM at the end of the list, and it's going to have automatically loaded the BOM in. It's have automatically created it. Okay. What I have is now the next step typically. Oh, and if I go in, like I'll just look at this item just so that I can show you this weldment here that it's a purchased item has auto filled in with different posting groups, accounting information. It's got an automatic unit of measure assigned to it. It's got a replenishment system. That's based on that template. So the template that was assigned to it has filled in a lot of the extra information that wasn't there. Okay. So what I want to do, I mentioned that the project manager, one of the first things they do is they start releasing orders to be sent out to be purchased, et cetera. So let me jump back into that BOM for the assembly table. Now I've done a little bit in the background here. I baked the cake to do a production order, but I'm not going to show the production order. It's a little too much time. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go look at inventory availability and see that I have 288 square feet of this sheet, this 7-gauge 304 stainless steel sheet in stock, and I need 4. So I could just pick that. Somebody could go out, pick that material. The other 2 are purchase parts where I have a price and I have assigned a vendor to them. So the gear worm and the gear motor. So by checking those checkboxes off, I have initiated a workflow. You could actually see there's 3 ready to transfer items here. Now I'm going to switch into a purchasing agent's view. We showed that earlier that there's different views for different people. And the purchasing agent has this ready to transfer. And what I get now is I see those 3 things that person checked off. If there were 20 jobs, I would see from all of the jobs in here. Right now, I'm going to do something I normally wouldn't do. I'll explain in a second why I wouldn't do this normally, but I'm going to just relieve this plate of stainless steel from inventory and pull it right out of inventory, and you'll see it just drops off the list. There's going to be an error that comes up because I empty the list, and we fixed that since, but when I recorded this, that error was there. Now I'm going to purchase the other items to the job because I need those to be purchased. I don't have them in stock. It'll create a new purchase order and it'll attach the gear worm and the gear motor. This is the error message I mentioned. So it has nothing to find anymore, and it got a little bit confused. So now when I go back and I close, I actually have 0 left in this out of the 3 that I originally had. So what's happened is I've gone in as a project manager, picked the stuff I want somebody to disposition, purchase, or pick from inventory, or produce in a manufacturing order of some kind. I highlighted those. The workflow causes them to show up on the buyer's list. The buyer goes in. This is buyer planner. Buyer goes in. Normally, we would use the pick document. There's a pick process. Pick process goes down to some inventory management team. They see the pick. They go and they fill in that they picked it, and they put it into a bin, and they mark that. And then the buyer sees that it's being picked and does the issue from inventory that I did. I just skipped that part because it's time consuming. So if I go back into the job though, as the project manager, and I find the job, so this next day or whatever, and I want to check the status of this particular assembly table because I'm planning on starting manufacturing it on the 10th, I can start to see that stuff is actually available. So the green means it's there. If I went out to the shop and I have a plywood crate that has all the parts in it, I should find it. These other ones that are light blue, I have purchase orders for them. So I can go through, normally I sort of talk about all of the different items in the menu here and the different things we can do. I'll briefly talk about the different choices for procurement. So buy the job, release from inventory, return inventory, build a job. These are all macros. The best way to think of them is they're macros that were created by Sabre that were built into the standard job functionality to make it easier. What I want to do though is I want to jump right into the purchase order that was created for these two lines. So I highlighted one of the lines and I selected to show me the document. And what I can see now is I can see these are due on the 3rd. Remember, the plan date of it was the 10th. So that's the assembly date. If I make it earlier, that's not going to have any effect. It's just going to be extra early. But if I make it late, let's see what would happen. So I'm going to set it to the 21st, which is about 11 days late compared to when I really want to do it. So I want this on February 10. So I refresh the screen and that line turns red. So as a project manager, I know I have to do something about this line. There's a problem with this line. And that is basically the core of how the Sabre ETO system works. So it lets me create purchase orders right from the job. I can transact the materials to the job. I can, as those materials are being purchased and those purchases are posted, the lines turn green and the actual cost of the job increases. As I add materials from a bill of material and they have prices on them, the budget of the job increases. I can compare the budget to the billing, and I can get a gross margin on the job, and I can see where it is in real time. I'll show a couple more little things very quick. One is let's collect some time, and I'll show you how the time collection goes. There's a whole approval process. I have a couple of videos here and I can go through the entire approval process. I'll just do what a timesheet looks like. So if Rob, as an engineer, wants to implement a timesheet and start collecting his time, this is what it looks like. It's just a very simple time card. I can summarize. I can see the summary of it. I have 34 hours so far put in this week, including a little bit of overtime that I put in on Thursday. Now, I haven't done this exactly correctly. In this case, I can re-enter hours on Friday for something if I've already got a line for it. So if it was more mechanical design, I can just put it here. But I threw some pneumatic design in on this Friday, pneumatic / hydraulic. And basically now I've added in 8 hours, got a 42-hour week, and I submit that for approval. So that could go to a supervisor. Supervisor could review it, accept it, and mark it off. Yes, Rob, I approve your overtime. I approve these hours. I think you've put your time to the right job. So I'll skip the approval process, and I'll also skip the invoicing. I'll go to the Gantt scheduling just to show that there's other add-ons that are specifically designed to work in jobs. So this is the visual job scheduler by a company called Netronic, good partner of Sabre. We work with them all the time. The visual job scheduler lets us view the jobs in a graphical view. And one of the more useful views is this histogram view. So I'm using the scheduler to drag work onto different people to set who has and does not have. I will answer that question in a second. And in this case, Lena here is overloaded. I have the orange bar on the engineering time means for all my engineering team, there's some overload. And in particular, it's Lena. I don't have enough hours for Lena to do this work. So if I go back and I look at the resource view, I can see Lena here, and I've accidentally double booked her, but Marty has time. So let me move that onto Marty, and you can see that job. You can see the interconnections of the work, and now I've level loaded my work for this team they are no longer, I don't have any team members who are overloaded. So very handy, have a few clients using it. Also has a lot of capabilities, like I can use the same system to see a job view, which is essentially like a Microsoft project Gantt chart. So if somebody needs a Microsoft project, you can't print it. You can filter down to the job, print it, and you can see the successors and I can't remember what they call them. The successors and drawing a blank. But you can see the connections of all of the tasks and how they connect to one another. And the what you're seeing on the screen, the little bars are the actual hours that were budgeted towards that. So those hours are either on a person or they're on a generic resource, and you drag them from the generic resource to the person. So when I copied into my job for my template, I was using the generic resources. So I'm a little bit over time. We only have a few more minutes for Q&A, but I'm excited to answer some questions. So Caitlin, I think I saw some questions come up.
Yeah, it looks like we have a question here. Why do we need an add-on for Sabre ETO? Isn't it a part of Business Central?
Yeah, Sabre, like Business Central, what Microsoft is trying to do with Business Central is create a sort of a core ERP system that does most of what most people are looking for within a standard ERP, but not try to be all things to all people. Some ERP systems try and add every feature possible within their ERP system, and then what you get is you kind of get some that are half-baked, not quite super great in the way they were implemented. And so Microsoft is trying to create that core Business Central system and then leave it open to partners like Sabre who specialize in industries to add extra capabilities. So for instance, there's some food manufacturing add-ons for Business Central. Now I noticed that, I hope I answered that question. I noticed Christine asked, in BC, is it called a project or called a job? And the answer is yes. In Business Central 23, which is the version which is currently out, it is called a job. And in Business Central 24, which is the version that's out in 3 weeks, it's called a project. And unfortunately, Microsoft is right in the middle of changing it, and I could not get a copy of the environment that has the word project in it. I went and looked for it, and it's just not available to me yet. So I went with the one that had job in it. I also noticed a question from Gerald in chat. Or Gerard, sorry, Gerard. Gerard, is there an ability to set a budget at time of order entry and then update as you go along with project? Yeah, so here's what we do. Business Central's budget out of the box is the current engineered designed budget. So as engineers change their items and choose the parts and put in, like somebody in project management puts in which resources are actually assigned as opposed to generic resources. So you get a more actual labor rate as opposed to the generic labor rate. It updates and it's constantly refreshing. That I'll call active budget. We added the ability to put something we called forecast in. And the forecast was the original forecasted cost per the Excel spreadsheet that was created by the sales team. So that's kind of your set a budget at time of order entry. We call it the forecast. So there's some fields that we added and a capability of flagging and entering a line that is not a budget line, it's a forecast line. So that's how we kind of dealt with that. I don't know if that helped and answers that question or not. So in chat, does anybody else have any questions? We can yes, in part from Gerard. We can unmute Gerard too if you want to ask the question. Or if there's anybody else who has a question, put your hand up and we can unmute you. Oh, we have a hand. David. Can we unmute David?
Yeah. Do you know anybody who's implemented this in a repair station or a repair and maintenance kind
like
of
an overhaul and repair business?
There you go.
Yeah. No, I have had clients before this was available who were overhaul and repair. This would probably be really good in overhaul and repair because you don't know when you get the parts, you don't know what you're going to need to do to them. So you're going to have a job that's kind of unknown, if you will.
Right.
You can't have a real bill of material and routing because you don't know. Maybe it needs CNC machining. Maybe it needs a lathe. Maybe it needs grinding. Maybe it just needs new parts to be completely rebuilt for it. So what you want is you want to bring it in and have it as these projects. Oops. What's that? I'll stop sharing so that I don't embarrass myself with my pop-up messages. You're going to have these projects and you're going to be able to just kind of load into them what it is you have to do. What we have done also is there out of the box in Business Central, there's an assembly module, which allows you to create a really simplistic BOM for something. And it doesn't even really need to be a proper part you sell. It could just be a template. So for O&R, often you're going to get a part and this type of part, usually we repair it this way, or this way. So you could create 3 assemblies that are the 3 repair types for that part. And when you've analyzed it and resolved it and determined, you can just import that and it'll automatically put the resources required, the materials required, and like all the estimating in for that type of repair. The other problem that I love with you guys is you have absolutely no idea when you're going to get something at your back door. It's crazy. Stuff just shows up in a box. And then later you get the paperwork. So with this, you could create a project. You need to know the customer probably, but you could create a project and just bring that stuff in and you wouldn't have to worry about inventory management and all the stuff a normal ERP system requires. Is that helpful?
Yep, very helpful. Thank you.
Anybody else? I'll have you put your hand down, David, because it gets confusing. Just have to click the raise hand button again. Any other questions? There are no other questions. I think I might call this one. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for your time. Go ahead, Caitlin. Take us out.
All right. Thank you, Rob, for presenting that. That was a really great overview for everybody. Again, we do have a quick webinar feedback form that's in the chat. And make sure to check out our 30-day free trial of Sabre ETO. If there's nothing else, if we have no more questions, then I guess we're done here.
We let you all go back to the wild. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Rob.